Hi, Stephen. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. So nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too. I'm loving this reimagining of Queer as Folk. And of course, I think my first question is just why did you want it to be Queer as Folk? Why not start from scratch? What was it that spoke to you about the original?
I mean, Queer as Folk completely changed my life. The impact that seeing that in my basement with the volume turned down on mute when I was a kid, the impact that that had on me, uh, seeing myself reflected, seeing a queer community for the first time, it's unforgettable. And I think a lot of queer people really share that experience, but so much has changed in the last 20 years.
Mhm.
And I think that the actual word queer itself means something different now than it did back then. And so it was really important for me to tell queer stories with authenticity and empowerment. And it now just felt like the right time to reimagine this title for a new audience.
I love that. And that's really reflected too in the writer's room, which I believe, like the talent is LGBT, which is so rare to see. How does
Yeah.
that open up the storytelling doors for you? What is that collaboration process like?
I mean, it allows us to go into areas that I don't think a non-queer writer's room would be able to do without being completely offensive. Because that's what we want it. We want it to be authentic. We want it to be messy. We want our characters to be flawed and human and still lovable. And I think the room that we had really allowed us to dive deeper into these stories and get more nuanced. Um, and yeah, to be unapologetic.
Yeah. And the premiere, takes us to a very dark place that then has, resounding impact throughout the series. Why did you want to start there? Why did you want to really, and it's so much even more part of the forefront of the conversation of our nation nowadays,
Yeah,
like today.
it's
Yeah.
true. Like, unfortunately, these conversations around mass shootings are only more relevant as time goes on. I've been developing this show for a while now, and I couldn't imagine making Queer as Folk in 2022 without including a reflection of the real climate that queer people are now existing in. And, but that being said, as you know, from having seen the show, we never show the shooting. We never show the shooter. We don't tell that story. Our show is really about how a community rebuilds in the wake of something like this and how we rebuild in a way that is bigger, better, safer, and maybe more inclusive than the spaces that existed before it. And I think that's, I went to Orlando. I met some of the Pulse survivors who were interested in speaking, or very early on in the process, and those meetings really impacted the trajectory of the story of like where this was going. Um, yeah.
That's great. I'm glad that you did that. I think that that's really important and powerful. And speaking of powerful, I love how intersectional the story does feel, and it does feel so much more authentic in its diversity. How do you
Mhm.
ensure that's part of the conversation in the writers' room?
Well, it's interesting because it's like we're not intentionally trying to like check off any like bingo cards. It's just the reality of setting a show in New Orleans and be reflecting queer culture now. Like I'm really, our um our goal is not to like, sorry, I'm gonna
That's
give you an
okay.
extra minute of time because my brain is just fried.
That's
I
okay.
just had a big espresso shot. Please give her an extra minute. But I can you ask your question again?
Oh, how do you, or you said it's not intentional, but
Yeah,
how
yeah.
does your writers' room lead to these conversations and this
And
inclusion?
the inclusion.
Mhm.
I mean, you can't tell a queer story without thinking about inclusion and diversity, but it's not also, like I said, it's not like a bingo card. We're not trying to tick off any boxes with this show. We're just trying to be authentic and honest. And in all honesty, the characters in our show are really a reflection of my community, of and I'm just trying to like give visibility to people who are in my life, who maybe don't ever get to see themselves on screen.
Which is wonderful. I know you've said that this is like a jumping off point from the original Queer as Folk and not reflective of the Showtime version. But where do you hope to jump off to? What is your like long-term vision for the show?
I mean, there are still so many stories left to tell, and I think we end our season in a way that like kind of shows that, because queerness like exists in every community all around the world, every
Mm.
culture, and we're not trying to represent everyone, but there is a plethora of like stories that need to be told, and so I think we still have a lot more work to do on our show and a lot more stories to tell.
Well, I cannot wait to witness them. So thank you so much. I've loved
Thank
it so
you.
far. I can't wait for
Thank you
more.
so much. So great to meet
Thank you.
you.
You too.